So I just have a question. When is the last time you bought a product because you felt sorry for the vendor? Chances are you first had a need or desire and then sought out an item to fulfill that desire. Hello, my name's Tom Froese. I'm an illustrator and a top teacher on Skillshare, where I've helped tens of thousands of students unlock the world of commercial illustration. Welcome to the channel. So the topic of today's episode is the idea that it's who you know, not what you know. And well, I just want to talk a little bit about how I think that's not really the whole story. And actually, this kind of thinking can actually be toxic and self-defeating. This idea places way too much blame and responsibility on your outside circumstances, things that you just can't control. And it overlooks the part you have to play in reaching out and getting yourself known by others. So this episode is inspired by a recent comment on my last episode, which was about how to attract the work you want when nobody's giving you your big break. So the comment was filled with so much discouragement, but it also sort of expressed a sort of cynicism that I think seems to be at the root of what has made this person, the person leaving this comment, has made their experience so hard in the first place. So let me explain. I don't know this person at all, but it did just kind of shoot my brain off in all kinds of directions. I mean, first of all, I'd just like to thank this commenter for sharing their raw feelings on the issue. And also, I asked, if you're watching this, ask your forgiveness if anything I say in this response today seems to go overboard or doesn't express enough sympathy for your particular situation. I think that's entirely possible, that I will certainly be ignorant about a lot of what's going on in your personal situation. So my comments here are more a reflection of my own beliefs and attitudes and less about this commenter's specifically. Again, since I don't know your exact situation other than the few words you gave me. So what I don't mean to do is to shame this person for feeling the way they feel. And again, I want you to just see my comments here as friendly, tough love. So here's the comment. So this person's responding to my opening words of the last video about how if I were sending out 120 emails to art directors and not seeing any responses, I too would feel like giving up. The viewer responds, I've already given up. Even though I spent 2 degrees in illustration and animation. It's all who you know. It's demoralizing. COVID, PTSD, and mental health doesn't help. And I generally find that people aren't sympathetic to circumstance or willing to pay you what your work is due. So just like the last video, I'm gonna just go through this person's comment point by point. So even though this person wasn't asking me for advice, my instinct is just to kind of go through what's going on in that comment and just give you how I would respond to them. So this person says they have 2 degrees, one in illustration and one in animation. So sadly, having degrees in anything these days doesn't really guarantee success in the work world. Now, I've not done my research to back this, but my hunch is that the more degrees people have, especially in creative hands-on or practical fields, the more likely they'll struggle to match their post-grad success to their expectations. People who don't find their place as creatives, who do not have confidence in their craft, but who still love the field, will tend to go further on in their studies, perhaps moving up into higher levels of academia to, in a sense, compensate. Those who haven't found their voice in craft as creatives may continue to pursue it at higher levels of education, hoping that one day things will click. I speak for myself. Like while I was in art school, I naturally at that time didn't have a sense of what kind of creative I could be. I didn't see the potential I would later find. Still, being passionate about design and art, I knew I wanted to stay in the field. The only path I felt would match my abilities and interests was to pursue design at the graduate level and to probably teach. In some sense, that's actually happening for me right now, but in a more kind of, I don't know, hybrid scenario or something like that. I'm now teaching, but not at the academic level. I found my voice and craft as a creative, but not as a designer as I thought I was going to be when I entered art school. So today, having found success in the work world, I no longer see it necessary to pursue my master's in design or illustration. Now, is that because I no longer value higher education, or is it because I realized that what I wanted was to be successful as a practitioner, and therefore being a practicing creative professional, as I am now, the time, expense, and effort of pursuing higher education in this field would kind of feel like a step backwards or a lateral move at best. Now, to me, 2 degrees or bouts of education suggests a comfort being a student and an avoidance of the real hard work of making it work in the real world. Being in school feels more like being at the top than at the bottom. You emerge from these higher years of your degree or program, and then you land at the bottom of the professional food chain, or not even in it at all, or so it feels. So I would just say to this person, you have to ask yourself, what are you willing to do in order to get where you want to be? What actual skills and experiences do you need to get there? And how do your current actual abilities measure up? Here's where you have to be realistic about your potential. You know, if you're 5'6", you'll probably never make it as a player in the NBA. Now, you could still try for a career in professional sports using this analogy, but this is where taking the academic route or some other path within the field is a very viable option. So to summarize, the fact that you've gotten 2 degrees may suggest that you're more comfortable learning and feeling that sense of progress than getting out there and kind of just making things work in the real world, so to speak, because that actually, it feels different. It's a different kind of work ethic that's required than just being good in school. Now, that being said, you did no wrong by getting the degrees that you got. I have, I started in computer engineering, and then I went into art to get my degree in design. So, in a way, I've been kind of like a long-term, late blooming learner as well. So there's nothing wrong with getting degrees, but I remember my mindset at the time in school where it was like, well, if things don't work out for me as a practitioner of design, I can always teach because I enjoy teaching. And that seems like a sure thing. And it just felt, in terms of my limited imagination at the time for what could be, that was the low-hanging fruit. So I just would encourage you to consider whether you could apply all the effort, the same amount and kind of effort you put into your education. Can you put that also into just making it work? And in fact, you might have to make an even more strenuous effort to get where you want to be in the real world, because it's just a totally different beast. So now I'm going to go through some of the things that you felt like were up against you in the way of your success. So you mentioned COVID. So the impact of COVID is kind of hard to overestimate. So here's where everybody, in a sense, gets a pass. It's going to hit us each in different ways, but I think we're all going to get hit by it. So I think for all of us, this whole COVID thing has drastically shifted the quality of our lives. It's not as good as it used to be. Life used to be more free and fun before all these masks, lockdowns, and ever-widening rifts in our societies along political lines. For many, COVID's been a death sentence on their careers. There's no denying this, and I can't speak any words that would alleviate concern for many. All I can say is that we can't move forward by lamenting our circumstances. We have to take stock of what we have right now and make the best of it as best as we can. Even if we still can't find success, we should take pride in our efforts. We have to play with the cards we're dealt. I feel like I'm just spouting off cliches. In the game of Scrabble, we can only move forward by playing the letters we have on our trays now. If we have all vowels, we can't blame ourselves for that, but we can't feel sorry for ourselves for being down on our luck in terms of getting bad letters. There's only one thing to do: apply our best, trying to be strategic with what we have and paying attention to what's on the board and leveraging that as much as possible. We can only do what we can do. Now, you also mentioned PTSD and mental health. Now, here's where I have nothing to say. I don't know your situation, and I haven't personally struggled to the point of no return. I've been definitely severely depressed in my life and have thankfully come through it. And, to this day, I fight low-level mental health issues all the time, but I'm bolstered by supports that I probably take totally for granted in my life. So, all this to say, life is fragile and anything can happen that could make it all come crashing down in an instant. So I'm not trying to say look at me as the prime example. I have to use myself sometimes as an example because I'm most familiar with the content in here. But what I'm saying is I understand the fragility of our situations, the fragility of our success. So right now I'm doing pretty good, but I know that one bad thing could happen and it could send my life spiraling down. And that's just my big disclaimer, I suppose. A lot of the times people maybe use this as an opportunity to just say, if you're going through some really hard things, whether it's PTSD or mental health issues, seek professional help. And you probably know that. So I don't want to speak down to you in that level. But it's worth saying, at least if you're going through a rough time on your own, you don't have to do it alone on your own. You can find help with a professional or hopefully someone that you know and trust. The good news today is, of course, dealing with issues of mental health today is far more acceptable than it was even 20 years ago when I was in college. To me, being depressed was something that I was deeply ashamed of. I just want to say, having mental health issues or things like PTSD, again, which I actually know very little about, is nothing to be ashamed about. So all of this kind of comes to a head in this next point that this commenter left, which is, he says, it's all who you know. And he's quoting that kind of old adage of, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And this is sort of true, but to say this as a blanket statement, I don't think that it's fair to you or to anyone else who's enjoyed success. I think this is a cynical statement that needs to be thought through more deeply. So yes, connections are hugely important. And yes, that old cliche about how it's not what you know, but who is, there's truth to it. But who or what is responsible for who we know in our lives? Is it being born into a rich, well-connected family? Is it being born into a certain socioeconomic background? So these are all things that we can't change. These are things about the kind of group we find ourselves around. These things can be applied to kind of just mass demographics. But what about you as an individual? What are you doing to be attractive enough to draw people to you, to make those connections in spite of where you're from or what your kind of current circumstances outside of your control are? If we blame others for not connecting with us, we're missing out on the opportunity to become truly attractive to others and worth connecting to. So here's just another anecdote from my life. In my early 20s, I struggled a lot with self-esteem and depression. I believed that I was unworthy of others' esteem or friendship. I believed that that others mostly just thought poorly of me. I don't know why I'm laughing. I thought that when I wasn't around, people were relieved or they discussed how strange or annoying I was to be around. I believed that most people looked down on me and that I somehow gave off an unsavory vibe. I was not only an unattractive person to be around, but I was somehow repulsive. Now, my sister, who is in the midst of her studies in psychology and counseling at the time, she gave me a book, and I can't remember the title of the book or the author. All I remember is that it had a purple cover. This book that she gave me shattered my negative worldview. It made me realize that most people are actually feeling too badly about themselves to even notice whatever it is you feel unworthy or badly about in your own mind. We narcissistically believe that others might have these kind of well-formed negative ideas about us, even total strangers who just meet us for the first time, when the truth is that people are generally not really thinking about us much at all. You know, in a room full of strangers, most people are not only too preoccupied with their own anxieties to notice your flaws and judge you on them, they're also hoping someone else, maybe you, will take the initiative to say hi and break the ice. And this is all to say we want connection, but few of us are willing to make the first move. We're too afraid of being judged and rejected by others, and it's usually just our own low self-image that gets in our way. When I realized that I had something to bring into most conversations, when I realized I was as worthy as anybody else to belong and connect, when I realized I had the power to actually make others feel accepted and connected to, that the very people I was afraid of rejecting me were actually hoping I would connect to them first. This was the beginning of a new sense of confidence that has carried me through to this day. Now, I know there was a lot of work behind the scenes and support from my family and friends. To say the least, there was lots of systems going in there to help undo whatever negative things I thought about myself, those beliefs at that time that I had of myself, like those have been rewired. But I think it's just vitally important to remember that when it comes to connecting to people, it's not just about waiting and hoping others will see the value in us. It's about believing we have innate value and going out and connecting to others because they want us to connect to them. They're doing the same thing, hoping that others will connect to them. If we can make the first move, that's just, it's empowering, and it generally just, it not only works for us in terms of building connections, it actually improves the state of someone else's life as well. Anyway, back on my main thought here, it's not that I'm more worthy than anybody else to enjoy connection, but simply that I'm permitted to participate in the game of connecting with others. And more than that, my participation is desired. While we're definitely limited by the people we're able to meet and make connections with in our lives, certainly there's no sense in complaining about who you don't know. There's no sense in complaining about what letters you have on your tray in Scrabble. You got to just play those letters. Be empowered to seek out connections, to reach out, to believe that you have something to connect over, something to contribute to the conversation. Don't be a victim. Don't sulk about how you're not blessed with the connections you need to make it in the world. Get out there and make connections. Don't wait for them. Make them yourself. This does require a shift in attitude from feeling like you don't know the right people and therefore that this circumstance that you're in is to blame for your lack of success. It shifts that blaming victim mentality to realizing that your success depends on how you act in the world yourself. What risks are you willing to take to connect with others? What contributions do you truly bring to your relationships? If you can't think of what those are, develop on those. Be realistic. Realize that it's okay to be deficient in an area. That doesn't make you a bad person. But you just need to rise to the challenge of becoming better. It's important to assume total and utter responsibility for your own success. While there are thousands of things and people that can possibly take us down that we actually can't be blamed for, there's really only one thing we can possibly hope to have control over changing, and that's our mindset and habits. If success as a commercial artist is your goal, it can be debilitating if you only look at the big result or goal you hope for, especially if you can't see the smaller steps you need to take along the way. In his book, Atomic Habits, writer James Clear talks about the 3 layers of behavior change: outcomes, processes, and identity. Outcomes, or the outer layer, it's like these 3 concentric circles. So the outer circle is the result we are hoping for, becoming a successful illustrator perhaps. Processes is the middle layer, the middle circle, and the processes are the habits and systems we use to achieve our results or outcomes. And then in the middle is identity. This is the inner layer, and it's concerned with changing your beliefs. We'll have more success achieving the outcomes that we want by focusing on our habits and beliefs about who we are first. And I'll say that again. So we'll have more success achieving the results or our goals, and that's the outer ring, by focusing more on the inner rings, the kind of habits we have and the beliefs we have about who we are, our sense of identity. Those are the inner rings. And if we can change those things, we'll have more of a chance of achieving that outer ring, those goals. So again, back to my kind of anecdote. In my depressive younger self, having read this breakthrough book from my sister, I had a profound shift in my identity and who I believed I was, and that changed everything else. I used to believe that I was unworthy and too strange to be liked by most people. I know it sounds crazy. I mean, it doesn't sound crazy that I feel weird. I mean, I feel weird all the time. I think most people are weird. But it's strange to think that I believe this so much that it made me unworthy. But then I realized most people felt the same way. And then from there, I realized I'm like most people and therefore not all that strange. And again, I realize I'm unique and kind of an oddball in many ways. But I have learned to embrace rather than to be ashamed of this. Ultimately, I believed I was worthy of connection and that others actually wanted me to connect with them. I finally believed this. My beliefs changed, and so my processes changed. I started initiating connections with new people in my life. And, being a student at the time, there were always situations where I was meeting new people. So yes, this made me vulnerable and it was still scary, but I was willing to take the risk because I now had hope of success, and my self-worth was not as connected to whether those people actually received me back. Again, any rejection that others would probably be giving me was more about what's happening in their own mind or lives than what was actually wrong with me. Usually if we ever feel offended by the acts of someone, it has way less to do with us directly, or it's less personal than we think it is. It's usually something wrong in that person's life, and if they had a moment to think about it, they might adjust their interaction with us back. So from that point, the results that I really wanted, which was connection with others, just not feeling so alone in my depression, these started to come not kind of once in a while in these isolated moments, but all over the place. I made many more friends. I started going to more social events and connections, both personal and professional. And these things kind of compounded from there. Yes, while you do need to forge connections to make any meaningful success in the work world, I would say it's not simply who you know, but who you are to others. People are attracted to being attracted to. And when you make others feel you're attracted to them by reaching out to them, in spite of feeling vulnerable, you yourself will become more attractive. Now here's another one that really got my mind firing in all these different directions, which is people aren't sympathetic to circumstance. This is one of the things that the commenter left on my last video. People aren't sympathetic to circumstance. So I just have a question. When is the last time you bought a product because you felt sorry for the vendor? Chances are you first had a need or desire and then sought out an item to fulfill that desire. So just over the weekend, I went onto Amazon. I needed some new drinking glasses because we broke most of ours. And when I made that purchase, whether the person, the seller, selling those glasses was going through a hard time at home or not, that had zero to do with my purchase. I wanted the glasses and then I bought them. And most people go about their purchases in this way, even if they're purchasing your time or hiring you. Obviously people care about you, but they don't make their decisions based on your personal circumstances. So the question is, how do your current circumstances position you competitively on the market? The answer is zero. People won't hire you because you need the support or money. They'll hire you because they want what you can deliver. They want what you can do. Don't put others on the hook for your success. Don't sell victimhood as your main product. Even if this earned you success, you would now be a professional victim. The moment you overcame your circumstances, you would cease being profitable. Imagine someone gives a panhandler a very generous gift. The panhandler can't go and buy fancy clothes and wear them on the job. They wouldn't feel sorry enough for them, and they'd stop getting money. They'd say,
looks like that guy has things covered.
That person just wouldn't look the part. Yeah, if you want to be a charity, you're gonna have to look raggedy on purpose. You're gonna have to look the part, but even then, you're still gonna have to hustle. I mean, if you're a panhandler, that's not an easy job. So what do you aspire to? Do you want people to seek out your talent, or do you want them to simply feel sorry for you? So again, I just have to say, of course, there's a level of concern we should all have for one another. And I also have to admit that sometimes a little bit of sympathy, a little bit of a boost can give us the break we need to get our careers going. So I definitely got some leg ups in my own life for sure. There were people who clearly saw more potential in me than kind of present profitability. They still gave me a leg up. They assumed some risk by hiring me, even though at the time I didn't have the experience to prove that I could actually live up to their expectations. I don't think I was qualified nor deserving of the kind of opportunities I had early on. All this to say, I agree that people should be sympathetic to our circumstances. At the human level, we should care for one another and see more than just the bottom line. At the same time, to most of the people we want to work with, we're complete strangers. There's no sense in wishing they'll give us a break when there are many others vying for the same thing. And some of these might be more qualified if we're honest. So I would challenge myself, I would challenge people in my own position who have some power to offer others a break. Do what we can for others lower down the ladder. This is a huge reason why I make these YouTube videos, and it's why I care so deeply about not keeping trade secrets in my teaching on Skillshare. At the same time, I'd challenge people who are down on their luck in some way to actually become a valuable, highly desired player. Don't wait for people to feel sorry for you enough to give you a break. Make products and provide services they truly want. I recently received an email from someone asking me to contribute to their fundraising efforts to purchase better digital equipment so that they could make better art for their dream project. I replied and I said, I wish them well, but as a total stranger, I was the wrong person to be asking. I told them they needed to start with their family, their friends, and their fans first. The idea is that it's the role of our family and friends to care more about us than our art or commercial viability. These are the people we can ask for sympathetic support. But you should also have work that's at least attracting some early fans. These fans are the ones who will believe in you the most. So maybe your first fans are also your family and your friends, and they often are, but maybe they're also your teachers or members of your community who have been encouraging you in your art. You need to be exhibiting potential before people will start investing in you. So my take on this person asking for my help for this computer equipment was that if your art's good enough, people will support it, believe in it, and even want it. Now, I took a peek at their art myself, and I didn't care much for it. Even considering that they made it using, what they would have considered inferior equipment. I didn't say this to this person, but I secretly hoped, well, like when he contacted me and I checked out his link, I secretly hoped I would be a fan and be like, yeah, sure. I mean, this guy has something going and I want to be an early investor. But when I saw his art, I wasn't impressed. And I'm not saying his art is bad. It just wasn't my thing. And so I'm definitely in that outer circle. Like there's the inner circle of family. the middle, maybe a circle around that of friends, and then this outer circle of fans. And outside of that is just everybody else. And I saw myself as everybody else in this person's life. So I said no thanks. Now, while we all need a bit of undeserved support, I don't see my role in this particular stranger, or to most strangers, as being such a patron. I don't see my role as kind of supporting every stranger who comes to me asking for support. If I don't know who you are, I'll pay you for something if you give me something valuable in return. Now, I hold myself to this same standard of like not asking strangers to support me. Like, I don't want patrons. So like, as a direct example, I actually have a hard time with the idea of starting up a Patreon account because I don't want people to support me. I want people to hire me for skills and results they actually want and need. I have a sort of a tenuous relationship with the idea of artists who want to be supported without a clear value proposition to those supporting them. At the same time, if artists have found ways of making a living by setting up a Patreon, and they found people, like an audience, who really want to support them, and that's a mutually beneficial relationship, then great, the customer is never wrong. People will support you if they believe in you, so all the more power to those who are making this kind of Patreon model work. As for me, this is not my goal in life, to kind of simply be financially supported because of my art or because I'm an artist or something like that. Probably one reason for the fact that I don't think Patreon's a thing for me is that I don't want to be on the hook for anything. The moment people are supporting my art beyond the level of a specific value in kind transaction, they become more like voters or shareholders in who I am and what I do. And I don't want anything to do with that. There might be all kinds of expectations around what I should provide for their patronage. Yeah, and I don't want any of it. So it's just kind of an aside. I want to be on the hook for something specific that I have made and which you have consumed or paid for. I will not be on the hook for who I am and what I am doing at a given time or moment. And I certainly don't want to be on the hook for what I might want to do next. When someone pays you out of sympathy, beware, they may want something in return. And even if they don't, you'll definitely feel that you're in their debt. If you're like me, you will not feel you have truly lived up to your potential until you start forging your own opportunities based on your own actual skills, talents, and abilities. So again, digging back into the riches of my personal experience, I know that I started my early adulthood in a career that I didn't completely earn. While I did have credentials and abilities to initially secure my position at this company, the connection itself was through a friend. His uncle was indeed the kind of person who would give a guy like me a chance, even if it wasn't totally the most profitable investment early on for my friend's uncle in this case. So one thing led to the next, and over the course of 3 or so years, I went from being temporarily contracted to be their kind of IT network guy to being their in-house graphic designer for his next startup company that went international at the time. And it should be said that at that point, when I was a graphic designer for him, I had no actual education as a designer or artist, and I had no real other experience. And to me, this always killed me on the inside to feel like I only got this position because of a connection I had. It always just kind of felt like luck. So I took a huge risk and kind of a big vote of confidence in myself. And I also took on the expense of dropping my salary position and my comfortable life. And I went to art school to earn my qualifications on my own and to forge my own path from there. So I don't know if this just indicates that I'm just the kind of person who I'm just that kind of person, and that maybe others they'd found it wiser and just as satisfying to embrace that position, that graphic designer position that they were given from a so-called patron or a friend's uncle or whatever. Maybe the person whose complaint I'm responding to would be more than grateful just to have someone give them a chance right now, like my friend's uncle gave me. When I put it that way, I would have felt the exact same way not knowing how things would turn out later on. But I think it's always important to understand the difference between making the most of a leg up on the one hand and only relying on the generosity of others on the other. We should not expect sympathy from others as much as we should expect actual quality and value in what we make and do ourselves. So lastly, I want to just address this last sentiment that was expressed in this comment, which is, people won't pay you what your work is worth. So again, my question is, what are you worth? What's the dollar value of an hour or a day of your time where it comes to illustrating and animating, or whatever else it is that you want to do for a living? Have you worked out a rate that's commensurate or equal to your needs and experience level? More commonly, there will be jobs that we do that will pay us far less than we feel we're entitled to. And on the flip side, more rarely, there will be jobs that we do that will pay us far more than we thought we could ask. And with experience, we tend to kind of see this gap close. And with some effort, we can get better at trending toward higher and higher pay. So at first when we work, we're going to get mostly jobs that suck in terms of pay. And then every now and then we'll probably get a little bit of a break and we'll get more money than we expected. And with experience, we become better at knowing what that middle line is. Like we get better at asking for more, we get better at closing that gap, and we get better at sniffing out clients who are going to be more likely to pay us what we want. But what people will ultimately pay us more for is the feeling that we can provide something both rare and of high quality. As artists, one of our most valuable things on offer is our perspective on client-defined problems and the skills necessary to give an attractive form to this perspective. That was a word salad. So what I mean is that people will pay us more when the kind of art we're making is both useful and compelling or attractive to them. So how rare is your current set of skills and abilities? What expertise do you offer to your clients that goes above and beyond that of your competition? Why should a client pay you $50 an hour when they can get a similar product or service for $20 elsewhere? What is your unique selling position? Again, this is not about whether you can earn a decent living wage or not. That's not your client's concern or responsibility. They want to have what you have, which nobody else can provide but you. My advice is to hold these two things in tension. So first, know what you're worth. Find a number, whether a salary or a rate that you believe you are entitled to based on your skills and experience, as well as your particular market. You can find salaries of illustrators by going to the AIGA website in the US or the RGD website in Canada. There is also an immensely helpful study put together by a guy in England. I'm totally forgetting it right now, but I'll leave it in the show notes. And so you should definitely check that out. You should also check out the Graphic Artists Guild Handbook of Ethical Pricing and Guidelines. So this is also called the Gag Book. Really word salad kind of title, but excellent resource, and I've used it many, many times in my career to set my prices and my rates. So these kinds of numbers, like what you're worth, what's the value of an entry-level illustrator or animator, these numbers aren't just made up. So it's good to be honest about what you want and where you actually are in the grander scheme. Check out some of these resources that I've just talked about and find your place in them. Maybe pick a place where you'd like to be in a year or so, but then also pick a place where you honestly think that you might be now, today. Some humility and patience will definitely go a long way here. But I said we need to hold two things in tension. So one is knowing what you're worth right now, and the other thing is not letting that be your only criteria for success. You'll have to endure a lot of jobs you're unhappy with along the way. So some will pay you dismally but perhaps there's some creative payoff, or by doing such and such a job, you actually forge one of these coveted connections. You know more people who can help you out later on down the road. So yes, sometimes we do things for exposure and connection. Asking for what we want is important. I strongly encourage all creative entrepreneurs to become comfortable asking for what you want and expecting it. At the same time, you have to be adaptable and see the bigger picture. You have to be realistic about where you're at right now and allow yourself time to grow into your expectations. You have to forgive yourself for not being where you'd hoped at any given point. You have to constantly scan your whereabouts to see what you're doing right and wrong, to see what you have and might want, and to see how you've grown, and all the while to be thankful for all good things. So to my dear commenter, I would ask you to look at your comment again and reconsider it against what I've said here. Are you holding yourself a victim of your circumstances? Are you expecting too much from others or even from yourself at this point? Like maybe you thought you'd be further ahead. Have you put in the time building on your own craft and voice outside of your studies? Have you tried to get work wherever possible, even if it's kind of only minutely related to what you really want to be doing? My hope is that you truly find a way and that blessings and supporters truly help pave the otherwise rocky roads to greater success for you. I don't know where you're at or how much in demand your art could be. All I can see is that you're in a hard place and feeling defeated. As you said, you've already given up, and for this, I'm deeply sorry. I really am. But if making art for a living is what you really want to do, if you have any passion left for it, consider what changes you can make in your perspective and maybe even your habits to get to where you want to be. Feeling demoralized is real, and I do not claim to have all the answers, but I can tell just from your comment that you spent some time blaming outside circumstances for your dissatisfaction. I know I don't know you or what you've gone through to try to get to where you want to be, but my sense is that unless you make a significant change to your attitude, you'll find it hard to get anywhere, not just in art, but wherever you fall back on moving from this point forward. So clearly I had a lot of thoughts that were kind of bottled up that this person's comment kind of brought out. And I know I may have said some things that will stir the pot a little, and I welcome your feedback on anything I said. Feel free to challenge anything I said with your own stories or experiences. And maybe I'll just leave a question with you guys, which is when it comes to this idea of it's not what you know, it's who you know, how has that been true or false in your own experience? I'd love to see what you guys think on the issue. Please leave that in the comments. And of course, like and subscribe to the channel if you found this video helpful. I really thank you for your time here, and I'll see you in the next video.